Weeding, pruning and deadheading is an essential part of keeping your urban garden looking lovely and encouraging new growth. Because you're outdoors, lots of plants and seeds can end up in places where you might not want them to be. Squirrels, birds and the natural process of germination means you can end up with all sorts of random plants in pots that you never really thought you put there, and that's probably because you didn't. What these plants are doing though is taking energy away from the plant that you actually want to grow in your pot, so it's really important to get rid of them. This is the basics of why we weed. So this seedling, for instance, is an interloper in this pot. We don't really want it in here, so I'm just going to pull it out. Now it's important when you weed not to just kind of grab at the leaves of the plant you don't want in. Instead, you really need to make sure that you carefully tease out the entire plant, including the root system and the longest taproot in there. That means that it won't come back with a vengeance next time. You might not get that many other plants in your containers, but when you see one, don't be afraid to pull it out. It's not meant to be there and it's taking energy away from the plant you want. Right, next up, tidying up and pruning. So pruning sounds quite extravagant and something you might do with, say, a rose bush, which it is, but you can also do it as just the general tidying up on your urban garden. Look at the difference between this heuchera and this one. This one looks a lot happier, but the fact is, if I took away a lot of these dead and overtired leaves, then this plant would be encouraged to look just as nice as this one within a matter of weeks too. When you're pruning, make sure that you go right to the base of the tired leaves, because otherwise you'll just end up with a load of sticks in your pot. So go to the crown of the plant and pull out the tired leaves. It's quite a quick job, and as I say, it can be really satisfying. It's one of those 5-minute things you do in the garden when maybe you just want to relax. And once you've got rid of all of those old dead leaves, it means the plant can have the space and the energy to grow new ones. You'll end up with a much happier looking plant in the long run. Finally, deadheading is something that's specifically done to flowering plants. What plants want to do, essentially, is flower so that they can go to seed and therefore reproduce. What gardeners want plants to do is flower and keep flowering. That means we have to get in the way of the going to seed process, and we do that by chopping flowers off just as they've gone off their prime so they don't go to seed and instead are encouraged to keep flowering. When you're deadheading, a bit like when you're pruning, you don't just want to snip off any random bit of the flower. You'll end up with a load of sticks. Instead, be bold and be brave and head right down to where the stem of the flowers meets the plant. With something like this pelargonium, you can snip it off, but it's way more satisfying just to pinch or indeed snap it off. By taking off these dead flowers, you're encouraging the plant to put more energy into growing new blooms. When you're tidying up, make sure that you get rid of all those spare random petals and bits of fallen flowers, because that's a good way of making sure that disease doesn't set in. So to wrap up, deadheading is about getting rid of old spent flowers to encourage the plant to make more. Pruning is about getting rid of old foliage and leaves to encourage the plant to put its energy elsewhere. And weeding is about getting rid of interlopers to make sure that you have exactly what you want in your pot. Urban gardens can also be a haven for pests that we don't want around, things like squirrels, birds and bugs. In our next lesson, we'll be talking how best to protect your plants from these unwanted visitors.